Yes, guys, welcome back to the Fantasy Football Fix YouTube channel. My name is FPL Nacho, and this is the second live stream of the pre-season. And in this live stream, we're going to in particularly looking at the FPL template and some different variations and directions that we can go down to have some alternatives to what a lot of people think is quite a boring FPL strategy. So we're going to have a lot of that to talk about this live stream. So first and foremost, if you are new around here, make sure you do subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit that like on the live stream. We do try and always hit 50 likes every single live stream. You don't want to be that person who disappoints on this live stream. And make sure you do say hi in the chat. It'd be great to see some familiar faces in the live stream. Thanks again for tuning in. And again, this is just going to be another one of the many live streams and videos coming over the course of the seasons, leading up to weeks leading up to game week 1. I think we have just over 2 weeks until that game week 1 deadline, and we still have a lot of FPL to discuss. No drafts are finalized. It is going to be very, very interesting to see how things change over the coming weeks. I can see Recycle Shoes in the chat. We're doing well. Faye Baker, hope you're doing well. Again, please do drop in any questions that you do have, guys. Again, we are going to have a bit of a setup here, looking at the template, dipping in and out of some alternative differentials we can look at. And then, of course, I want to be taking questions throughout this live stream. So please do not hesitate to put any questions you have in the chat. I will try and answer as many as possible, as quick as possible. So I can see Recycle Shoe saying, Cancelo, Robertson, Trent, James, Tomiyasu, Salah, Mount, Neto, Haaland, Jesus. What do I think about that team? Like it. Can't go too wrong with a lot of those premium assets that you mentioned. It's worth mentioning Tomiyasu, currently injured in pre-season, might not be available for game week 1, so you need to flag that one. Otherwise, like the team. Fabiga, hope you're doing well, and Rio Wang, hope you are doing very well. So as I mentioned, guys, we are going to be touching on the template team and importantly some alternatives to the template team that I think we should be considering going into game week 1, because quickly rounded up on the template, I think a lot of managers deem it to be quite a boring strategy to take in FPL going into game week 1. But unfortunately, boring usually means success at the start of a season. Now, from experience, I'm definitely a manager that likes to start off the season boring. And as the game weeks progress, once we see actual information about players, then we can start to make our moves and go off in our different tangents based on the information that we get. I think game week 1 is one of the hardest game weeks for us throughout the course of the season, because we have to remember we have very little information about new players and new managers in these sort of systems. And importantly, teams like Man United with Ten Hag, who knows how they're going to hit the ground running. Of course, we have a completely different setup in the likes of apologies, I had a little notification there. In the likes of Liverpool with Nunez operating up front. So we have a lot of these differentials and alternatives that we really don't know about going into game week 1. So that's why I like to be boring at the start, stick template, and then we can make our decisions as we progress throughout the season. Calm, hope you're doing well. Don't forget to hit the like. Yes, guys, please do hit the like on the live stream if you are enjoying it, of course. And Jason saying about Doherty versus Zinchenko. That's a really interesting one there, Jason. I do think Zinchenko at 5 million could emerge as an essential FPL option. We still don't know where he's going to be deployed in this Arsenal team. It is worth mentioning. But if he is going to be playing as a middle of a midfield 3, so basically as a number 8, and Tini operates on that left-back role, I think Zinchenko becomes almost essential in our FPL teams. We have to remember that he is 5 million, class as a defender. And originally Pep signed Zinchenko as an attacking midfielder, originally at his previous club. Then got reverted back as a left back, and obviously for his national team he plays centre mid. So honestly, Doherty versus Zinchenko, there's no debate there whatsoever. Zinchenko is your man if he does operate in that centre midfield role. Just all about the pre-season to see where he does to get deployed. Jack, hope you're doing well. See, we have plenty of questions in here. I'm going to cover a few more and we get straight in on this video looking at the template team. Helmner is saying Malacia at 4.5 million might be on corners from both sides for Man United. Yes. Again, another new signing that I think we need to monitor. I think with the opening fixtures of Man United being very mixed with the new manager in Ten Hag, I personally see that as an opportunity to put assets like Malacia on the watch list, get an understanding whether he is actually a good value pick. And then after the opening game weeks, if he looks like he's absolutely essential, he's bombing down the line, he's getting plenty of chance creation, then we can look to bring him in on maybe an early wildcard move or even just a free transfer. I don't think we need to rush him into our squads in game week 1. So guys, as I mentioned, this video is going to be focusing on the template team and how you could go about going alternative to the template team. So without further ado, let's check out the current template team. Okay guys, so as you can see here, this is at the time of recording, roughly what the template team is looking. Now, of course, this is based on current ownership and using the 100 million budget that we do have available to us. Of course, there are other players that are really highly owned, but we really do need to make sure we keep it within the 100 million budget available to us. So I'm going to quickly cover the template team super quick. A little bit of discussion on the kind of structure of the current template and why you should be looking to go towards this because of the flexibility. And then we're going to be obviously progressing into some alternatives available to us in the game that I think do offer real great value at less risk than other options might be in the game. So first up, we can see a 5 million goalkeeper in Mendy. Now, it's worth mentioning the likes of Sanchez and Raya are still owned by managers between the 10 and 20% ownership, but Mendy at 26.4% is the clear favourite right now in the FPL game. And being priced at 5 million, being a Chelsea asset first and foremost, it's worth noting, is quite an attractive thing for managers. 5 million guaranteed game time between the sticks. Quite mixed fixtures. Based on our fixture analyzer, they're actually 17th best over the first 5 game weeks because of a few tricky fixtures against the likes of Leicester, a tricky game against Leeds where we don't really know what we're going to be seeing under Jesse March. So I really do like Mendy at 5 million. Now, the thing that I do like about Mendy is that he gives you that alternative where you could bring in a premium goalkeeper and hold him for the coming game weeks, absolutely. But another goalkeeper that I do think managers need to consider is Ederson at 5.5 million. Now, Ederson is somebody who I absolutely wrote off when I saw the price, even though I thought it was good value. We know with Ederson that bonus points are really hard to come by because Man City don't really concede any shots. Therefore, he doesn't make saves. Therefore, he doesn't get involved in the bonus points. But I really do think at 5.5 million, getting an ownership in a Man City defender that you can just basically hold for the whole season is, on the face of it, really good value. And I want to hear your thoughts, guys, in the chat, what your thoughts are about Ederson, whether you think he is worth the 5.5 million in the game right now. But as we speak, Mendy is the template goalkeeper, and I understand why managers are going down that route. The one question mark I would have in regards to Mendy is that basically for goalkeepers, the only way of them actually scoring points is their bread and butter is clean sheets. And then we get the real kind of luxury points in terms of save points and bonus points. But we need to remember when we are buying premium goalkeepers, save points are sometimes harder to come by because naturally they do dominate games, these teams like Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City. And therefore, bonus points and save points don't necessarily accumulate into their points total. But I do like Mendy at 5 million. And the other question mark I do have about Mendy, which is worth noting, I do apologise for coming back on myself here, is that we don't know about this Chelsea backline yet. Now, to me, Koulibaly, Silva and Koundé sound like a brilliant back three, and I have no doubt that that will work. But in game week 1, where Koundé hasn't even been signed and Koulibaly's had no minutes, I do question how quickly Chelsea are going to hit the ground running. And whereas the likes of Reece James and Chilwell have so many different more avenues to points, like assists, goals, as we've seen, I think Mendy is very, very reliant on that front three and back three in front of him to really keep that ball out the net. So I've just got a few question marks about Mendy personally. But again, please do let me know in the chat, guys, what your thoughts are on Edouard Mendy as we speak. Now, quickly touch on the backup goalkeeper, Gazaniga at 11.2. We have no understanding right now that there is a 4 million goalkeeper available in the game to us. So it is worth noting that. I think a lot of managers are just going for any 4 million and sticking them in their teams. Unfortunately, there has been no absolute incredible goalkeeper that is looking like he'll be a starter in their sides. Okay, so now for the defence in this template team. And I think we have no questions about the first two I'm going to mention. That's going to be Trent Alexander-Arnold and Cancelo. Now, of course, Trent priced at 7.5 million, Cancelo priced at 7 million. I cannot believe they're priced at this. Honestly, guys, this is still phenomenal value in the game. Someone like Trent, who averages around 200 FPL points, and Cancelo, who had a 200-point season last year, you are not going to find a midfielder at 7.5 or 7 million who consistently gets in and around the 200-point bracket. So I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we are getting these players at this value. And again, it's worth noting the likes of Cancelo, he massively underperformed his actual output. Only scored 1 goal last season. He had about 80 shots and his expected goals was just about 4.5 over the course of the season. So not only is Cancelo in one of the best defences in the league, he also is a phenomenal attacking option and underperformed last season. And I only see Man City going from strength to strength. So right now, Trent and Cancelo for me are rightly so in the template, and I see no reason to deviate from those two. I see a lot of managers want to go to Diaz, Laporte, Stones for a cheaper alternative into the Man City backline. But I have seen this in the past, guys. And while, yes, you will get your moments in the sun of glory, over the course of the season, as it ticks by, you're going to be seeing Cancelo cropping up with those assists, with that odd goal, with phenomenal performances in the bonus point department. And you're just going to wish in game week 1 that you played that early play on Cancelo, because I really do think that's the route to go, guys. So those two, I'm not going to have many debates on, and please do let me know in the chat if you have a real kind of hatred for these two players, but I really do think that these two are just locks in our template team, absolutely. Now, Reece James at 44.1% is a really interesting one, and he is going to be one that we're going to be touching on later on as a potential alternative with a player in mind that I have. But at 44.1% ownership, we know that he's a brilliant option in that Chelsea defence. He's a great attacking outlet. And if Tuchel does adopt the 3-4-3 formation that we have seen in pre-season, which looks like it is going to continue, I don't see much competition for James this season. And I think he is a great option at 6 million. The question mark is going to be Perisic. We haven't seen many minutes at all, 0 minutes as we speak in pre-season for Tottenham. And we know Ryan Sessegnon was trusted by Conte at the back end of last season. And it looks like he's only progressing as a Spurs player. Looked great in pre-season so far. So I do question whether Perisic is actually going to be in the running for game week 1, or whether he is going to be getting minutes here and there in the opening few game weeks before he establishes himself as a starter in that Spurs team. And I think at 5.5 million, that is a lot of money to invest in a player that we have a few question marks about. And when we have players at 5 million or 4.5 million that we know are locked into their teams who are also progressive fullbacks, I do question whether Perisic is worth the punt at the start of the season, or we maybe wait until what we are all anticipating is a likely early wildcard to then bring in Perisic into our sides. So I'm going to be half predicting here that 36% ownership of Perisic dwindles each week as we get closer to game week 1. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a player take his place in the template ahead of game week 1. But again, guys, let me know in the chat what your thoughts are on Perisic as well. It'll be really, really interesting. I see we got Bikes Banner saying Maguire or TA, can't even decide. I don't even need to answer that question. Trent Alexander-Arnold every day of the week. I hope that was a joke there. And we heard about Recycle Shoes here saying, Tommy asked you out. I know I can't step away from Jesus. I wish I could. Are you thinking no to Jesus, but not now? Play it safe on ownership. So that's a really great question. And obviously, we're just moving into the midfielders now on the template. And I will touch on Jesus when we do get into the forwards there. Boys Banner is saying Haaland plus Diaz or KDB plus Nunes. And I think that the obvious answer is Haaland plus Diaz. Haaland, as you can see on the screen here, 61% ownership. And also Diaz, 30.7% ownership. Those are two players that are really up there in the ownership of teams. And I think rightly so, that is the better combination than KDB plus Nunes. And again, Tom's saying that about liking the live stream. Please do, guys, if you are enjoying it, drop a like. We always try and hit 50 likes, and we're already at 25. So if you can get us to 50 likes early doors, that will be massively appreciated. So I've rambled on about the defenders, usually the boring stuff, but this year it is actually quite exciting to see the prices of those defenders. The midfielders, again, Salah, a lot of managers having question marks about Mo Salah, whether he is actually worth the 13 million. We only have to look back at his FPL history and his records to see that at 57.8% ownership, I still think it should be higher, guys. Honestly, I think the fixtures are still brilliant for Liverpool, and I think Salah is still a lock on my side. And importantly, captaincy is so essential to a great finish every season. Obviously, I'm going to always preach this, guys, because it's my best ever finish. So sorry if this seems like a bit of a self-promotion, but as I finished 270th in the world last season, and yes, before you say it, I know it was a fluke, and it'd be great if it can happen again, but it probably won't. But what I want to say as somebody who did finish in that position, captaincy is everything. Honestly, you've got to hit your captaincy every week to be able to have a chance of finishing in that top 1k. And I think with someone who's so established as Mo Salah, so consistent on penalties, playing in one of the best teams in the league, I just think it's so difficult to go against Mo Salah. And importantly, a trusted captaincy option that we can happily whack it on at in game week 1 away to Fulham, and all these great fixtures coming up for Liverpool. I just don't see a way we can go without Mo Salah personally. Now, his Liverpool compatriot Diaz at 30.7% ownership, the 8 million bracket. And something I want to quickly touch on is this template side. So we can see in defence, all premium assets. In the midfield, we got a 13 million in Salah, 8 million in Diaz, 6 million in Bruno Guimaraes, and a 5.5 in Neto. So let's just quickly touch on that structure there. Why I think Salah is definitely worth your side bringing into your teams is because at 13 million, being the highest price midfielder, you have so much flexibility to go any direction you want. Now, of course, you can't go up, but importantly, you can go down to anybody. So if KDB, Son go absolutely mental in the opening game weeks and Mo Salah looks like a withered man, you can easily downgrade. Whereas if you start off with Son or KDB, getting up to Mo Salah, that additional 1 million is either going to require an early wildcard or multiple transfers and surgery to a team early doors to get up to him. And I just don't see the worthwhile the stress of doing that at the start of the season. Now, why Diaz in this 8 million bracket is quite important to our teams is because of the other options available in the game. Diaz is just one of many 8 million midfielders available, like Mason Mount, like Kulusevski, like Saka, like there's one more out there and I'm trying to remember who it is. Anyway, you get the picture. Having an 8 million midfielder is such an easy way for you to just move sideways if one does look really good or if your one actually really goes big. And Diaz right now is the flavour of the month in terms of the 8 million midfielder bracket. Now, Diaz, again, we're going to touch on Diaz because I think this is an alternative that we could look at breaking away from the template. If he does continue the form that he was in last season, I have no doubts that he is going to be one of the best 8 million midfielders available in the game. I think Kulusevski's up there, but with the signing of Richarlison, that does put both the question whether he could be a 70, 80 minute man who could come off early doors. But I think Diaz, with the fixtures for Liverpool, rightly so, is up there as one of the best 8 million template options available. Now for the two budget midfielders, Neto and Bruno Guimaraes, two players that have massively split the divide in the FPL community. First up, Neto at 5.5 million. I've seen a lot of people discuss this. What you will find is they have priced him very, very wisely and shrewdly. And that is because when you start to build your team, nobody looks at the 5.5 million bracket. They build their defense, they build their premium midfielders, they build their premium forwards, they chuck in their 4.5s, and you will notice that every single time you will be stuck around 5 or 5.5 million in the bank for one player. And when we look at those player departments right now, there's only really one option, and that is Neto. Now, I've seen a few people talk about Leon Bailey. Absolutely, he could be a brilliant option. But with his injury record, I know Neto was out all of last season, but Bailey has a bit of a history for injuries. And importantly, the risk of rotation in that Aston Villa side. I do question Leon Bailey right now as we speak. And I think Neto, with the fixtures that Wolves have, I believe they're fourth best on our fixture analyzer over the opening 5 game weeks. I think Neto just ticks the boxes to squeeze in to your team. Now, Bruno Guimaraes is another one. Bruno Guimaraes versus Martinelli is a real debate in the community right now, and I think it really shows what kind of manager you are. Bruno Guimaraes, tricky fixtures for Newcastle. However, guaranteed minutes, and what we did see last season is attacking potential. Worth mentioning, he did overperform. His underlying stats were not solid. I believe he had an expected goals of about 2.8, but he actually really overperformed that. I believe he had about 5 goals over that period, so he was on a real purple patch. Now, Martinelli is the other 6 million option that we have been discussing, and Martinelli would probably argue is a bit more of a rotation risk in that Arsenal team, but has real high FPL ceiling. And what is worth mentioning is Arsenal have some of the best opening fixtures of any team. And I really do think that in the early start of the season, that's another opportunity to go slightly against the template and go for a player that you know is going to get minutes, but maybe not as solid as Bruno's. But with Martinelli, you know you're getting a real high value player who actually underperformed his underlying stats last season. So kind of like a flip of Bruno Guimaraes of last year. So Martinelli versus Bruno, I think that's a real debate to have right now in the community. Last up, I know I'm waffling here, guys, the template, Haaland and Jesus. Now, Haaland is going to be a man that we're going to be talking about a lot over the coming game weeks, and someone we're going to be touching on later on in this stream. Now, Jesus at 60.5% ownership, and it's worth noting that I think he's actually now crept over Haaland as the most owned player in the game, which is absolutely ridiculous. But I understand the reasoning. 8 million for a forward who realistically we were all anticipating to be the starter in that Arsenal front three. Now, of course, Nketiah signed a new deal. I think we are expecting him to get game time, but realistically, Arteta needs to break Arsenal into the top four, and he wouldn't necessarily have signed Gabriel Jesus if he thought Nketiah was good enough to lead the line for Arsenal. So I see no reason why Jesus isn't going to be starting week in, week out. And because of the 5 substitute rule, I think we could whack on any player here that they could be a rotation risk coming off after 70 minutes. So I don't think that argument is necessarily there for Gabriel Jesus. And again, Arsenal's fixtures are so brilliant. I think he's such a brilliant option at 8 million. We have forwards again. We have forwards again in the game, guys, and it's really interesting. I like Gabriel Jesus. And Haaland. 61% ownership right now. Absolutely outrageous. And the real debate is Haaland versus Kane. Have to remember, Kane is like a third of the ownership of Haaland. And if Haaland just hits the ground running and you are on Harry Kane, you could get burnt real early. But I do think there is a debate for Harry Kane, and we are going to be touching on that later on in the stream. And a quick one for the bench, guys. Greenwood, currently the highest owned budget forward, but I do think that Archer at Aston Villa has the highest potential for a 4.5 million forward, so it's worth noting that. Andreas Pereira, will all know the deal. Probably the best 4.5 million midfielder in the game because of him being signed for Fulham. Carvalho has made his move to Liverpool. We're anticipating Andreas Pereira to operate behind Mitrovic in a very offensive Fulham side under Marco Silva. So I think Andreas Pereira is a lock into your side if you need a 4.5. Other alternatives could be Brentford's De Silva. And Nico Williams has been signed for Nottingham Forest to replace Jed Spence. Now, we are anticipating again Nottingham Forest to play wing-backs, which again just heightens Nico Williams as a potential FPL option. So I really do like that bench there, apart from Greenwood, who I think Archer might be a better option at Aston Villa. There's such a quick few questions, guys, and then we are going to dip onto some of these alternatives of the template. So Cheekster, always in the live stream. Hope you're doing very well. I'm doing well. Hope you are as well. Mina, I think Pope with Newcastle was a good choice than Mendy. So Pope, I do think is going to be a brilliant option because I think he'll have a really nice balance of save points. Newcastle are building as a defensive unit, but I think they are going to still concede more chances than Chelsea were. Therefore, we know Pope is a great shot stopper. He was a bonus point magnet at Burnley. Be interesting to see how he does actually become an FPL option in Newcastle, whether he does change and isn't necessarily as much of a bonus point magnet. But I do think he's a brilliant option. A nice balance between going to be making save points, going to get clean sheets. I like him. Fixtures are a little bit difficult, though. It is worth mentioning. Mina. Jack saying, if Chelsea sign Koundé and Kimpembe, does that indicate to us that Chelsea will play a back five? And yes, what I'm reading right now, the fact that they've locked in Koulibaly, the fact they've got Thiago Silva still for this season and still looking for another centre-back alongside Trevor Chalobah, I think that indicates that Tuchel still wants to operate as a back three with Chilwell and James as their wing backs. And I think if that does happen and they secure those positions, I think James and Chilwell, one of those becomes essential in our game week 1 squads. And so Hale saying top 3 6 million midfielders. Well, I think Bruno Guimaraes and Martinelli, as I mentioned, are right up there as some of the best 6 million midfielders in the game. Now, of course, Lingard has now been signed for Nottingham Forest, a 1-year deal, and he has come into the game at 6 million. Now, it's worth noting that I would have both Bruno, Neto, and Martinelli above Lingard as an FPL option. Few reasons being. First and foremost, we have no idea how Lingard is going to integrate into this Nottingham Forest team. Secondly, Nottingham Forest have a real mixed bag of opening fixtures, and I don't necessarily like dipping into promoted teams at the start of the season because we just don't really know how they are going to adjust to the Premier League. So I think for him, it's an absolute watching brief for Lingard. You see how he does operate in this Nottingham Forest team. If he looks anything like the man he was at West Ham in those 6 months or 8 months that he was there, then we have an absolute gem on our hands at 6 million. But for now, we put him on the watch list and we see how he does integrate into that Nottingham Forest team. And Mads is saying Zinchenko, good option for 5 million in the back for Arsenal. Must downgrade Chilwell to Zinchenko if I buy Ederson instead for Sanchez in goal. And yes, I don't mind that move at all. Again, it's all about where Zinchenko plays. If he does play left back, I still anticipate him to be a great FPL option, but I do question whether there will be rotation because Kieran Tierney is still an important part of that Arsenal team. But it's worth mentioning, I see no reason why Zinchenko would have left Man City to then go to Arsenal to get the same sort of game time. I'm fully anticipating him to be an important part of this Arteta team. And as I said earlier on the stream, if he does operate as a centre mid, I believe that at 5 million, he becomes an almost essential FPL defender. And looking at the screen right now with the template team, I would almost see Perisic coming straight out of this template and Zinchenko replacing him with 0.5 million in the bank. So I really do think, guys, if Zinchenko gets confirmed as Arteta's centre mid, you just take Perisic out of your team and you put Zinchenko in there, because I think that is going to be a brilliant option with the opening games that Arsenal have. So guys, we've touched on the template team. I want to look at the first alternative to this template that I think could be brilliant value and a bit of a scary move, but I think there's an opportunity there. And of course, it's going to be Harold Kane, the Spurs man. I cannot believe that he is the ownership that he is going into this season. You can see on the bottom screen there the fixtures that he has. Southampton at home. This is a team that historically can get absolutely pumped any part of the season. To have Southampton at home is a phenomenal opening fixture. Chelsea away, yes, we know their history against Chelsea is very, very difficult for them to get anything against Chelsea. But I would say that going into this season is probably the most optimistic Spurs fans have been going into a Premier League season in a long time. And I do anticipate a very, very positive result for Spurs there in game week 2. And then I think still some brilliant fixtures. Wolves at home haven't necessarily strengthened their armoury and defence this year. And a little bit questionable at the back end of last season with Bruno Lage. I think at home to Wolves, that could be a decent fixture for Kane. Nottingham Forest away, that could be anything. We really don't know, but I think that could be a brilliant fixture again. And then West Ham at home. So the fixtures are mixed. You can see that with our fixture ticker. There aren't all, hard blue colours. There's some tricky ones dabbled about there. But let's just remind ourselves, guys. This is Harry Kane, FPL royalty. He has averaged 199 points. So, for the good of the people, let's just round that up to 200 points over the last 8 seasons. The last 8 FPL. It's ridiculous that he has averaged basically 200 FPL points over the last 8 seasons. And he's only at 19.6% ownership. And that's, of course, because of Haaland dominating the highlights and the headlines and everything. It's just all about Haaland. But I really do think, guys, if you want to go slightly different to the template and you are a manager right now that thinks, I want to be different, I don't want to be sticking with the crowd, I want to go my own way, I think the first place you need to look is replacing Haaland with Harry Kane. So let's first cover the pros of going for Harry Kane. Well, first and foremost, you'll get an absolute guaranteed game time. Conte, like every manager who's ever managed Kane, will play him until his legs fall off. That is just absolutely locked on. Now, I know they signed Richarlison, and Richarlison can play as a forward, but there's just no chance Harry Kane is getting rested. And we saw Son take a penalty in pre-season. Well, you can bet that isn't going to be happening in this league either. So, Kane, guaranteed penalties, guaranteed game time in such an improving Spurs team under Conte. Now, just some notes here under Conte, because you can see obviously on the graphic here, his overall stats over the course of the season, 17 goals and expected goals of 18.87. So again, it's worth noting that he actually underperformed his expected goals. And this is a Harry Kane who is one of the most lethal finishers in front of goal. If he actually just had a normal finishing season, then he would have been 20 plus goals easily. So honestly, guys, I'm fully anticipating him to shoot 20 plus goals this season. Shoot. What is that logic there? Bloody hell. Right, just want to quickly cover his underlying stats under Conte. Conte stepped in around game week 15. From game week 15 onwards, we have to remember it was a little bit of a dodgy spell at the start of Conte's reign. 0.65 goals per 90, 0.64 expected goals per 90, 4.33 shots per 90. So we're getting that volume monster that we've seen from Kane over the years, and 0.32 assists per 90 as well. It's ridiculous. It's unbelievable underlying stats for a player. Now, of course, Haaland in the Bundesliga has been hovering closer to the 0.8 goals per 90, and the expected goals is through the roof. But I think the big thing here is very much tried and tested versus the brand new shiny toy. Now, of course, with Haaland, with his ownership right now, naturally, the safer managers, the managers that like to follow the template, that is me I'm describing there, will naturally get drawn to Haaland because of what can happen. Now, the cons are going for Kane. If you go for Kane and you avoid Haaland at 60% ownership, even if Haaland has an okay few game weeks, and let's say he gets a goal, and Kane blanks the first two, you are getting pummeled with your FPL rank. You are going to be really struggling at the start of the season. So you really need Kane to do well in that first game week. And I think the big thing about it, fixtures as well, is that Man City's fixtures are fantastic long term. And it's really frustrating because it's so hard to make the case for Harry Kane sometimes, just because Man City's fixtures are so good. They're in our fixture analyzer, top 2 for the opening 8 game weeks. And this is a Man City team that dominate the ball, dominate the game, and dominate chance creation. And when we put a player like Haaland's ability in front of goal, I think the assumption is that we are just going to get guaranteed FPL points. But again, guys, this is for the managers that want to go slightly against the grain. 24.8 predicted points for Kane. Now, Haaland is sitting around the 33 bracket, but we have to remember, we have no data from the Premier League to come to any concrete conclusion with predicted points, whereas Kane, we know we can. So all I'm saying, guys, is this. I'm probably going to go for Haaland because of the ownership. I don't like to be scared in the first few game weeks. I don't want to be worried about him going mental at 60% ownership and I'm sat there with Kane. Because if he blanks in game week 1, you know everybody wants to go sideways to Haaland as game week 2. But all I'm saying is, if you want to go slightly different, you can't come much better than Harry Kane. This guy's going to be guaranteed game time, guaranteed penalties. He's just the man, really. So let me know in the chat, guys, what your thoughts are. I'm personally going to go for Haaland because of the ownership, but I honestly think Kane, I would not be shocked if he hits the ground running. I know he's got this August curse, but really, guys, that's all a myth, isn't it? We know that. And I think Kane is going to be a phenomenal asset over the course of the season. And one thing is worth noting as well is Haaland's injury record. That I can fully anticipate a situation where Haaland does pick up a few knocks, Man City revert back to a sort of play that they did last season with Foden operating in the number 9 while Haaland adapts to the Premier League. We know Kane is fully up to speed with the Premier League. And, you know, guys, I really think Kane could be the ultimate differential in game week 1. But let me know in the chat what your thoughts are on Harry Kane going into game week 1. I think he's one of the best differentials we can consider. So we see John saying, Meslier for me is underrated as an option, especially with the potential early wildcard to bail you out. Always good for a bonus and nice fixtures to start. I think, John, that's a really good point on 2 fronts. First and foremost, Meslier. Now, I'm not a big fan of Meslier in terms of the goalkeeper department, and I think you always want to bring in a goalkeeper that you actually rate, and I just don't rate Meslier as a goalkeeper. Secondly, long-term injuries to both Ayling and Dallas. How are we going to see this Leeds team adapt without their star men, Rafinha and Calvin Phillips? So right now, I think there's a lot of question marks about Meslier and Leeds as a team as a whole. Fixtures are great, though, it is worth mentioning, but I think I would rather go for safer bets with teams that have actually been able to retain their players going into the new season. And what I want to quickly touch on as well is the wildcard to bail you out. Now, I think a lot of managers are probably saying, well, if you go Kane and Haaland goes big, then you just use your wildcard and go to Haaland. Now, I see it the opposite, to be honest with you. I think personally that you go with Haaland at 60-odd% ownership. You ride out the first few game weeks, and of course, you've got that brilliant game week 2 fixture against Bournemouth. And then if we see Harry Kane go mental and we understand that he is the man to own, then we can look to do the sideways move or wildcard if we see Son emerge as a brilliant option in the Spurs team. So remember, guys, the wildcard is always available in your back pocket. But if it makes sense to you, I would much rather have a high ownership player and wildcard to a low ownership than a low ownership and have to wildcard to a high ownership. I hope that makes sense there, but naturally the low ownership players can't hurt you as badly. So that's why the wildcard is probably better coming off the high ownerships to the low ownerships this season. And Cobb saying, Perisic to Gabriel and Neto to Martinelli. And no, I don't support Arsenal. Yes, I think Gabriel is a great attacking asset in the game. He had a few goals last season. And obviously, Neto to Martinelli, I think you're going from probably more guaranteed game time in Neto to a bit of more of a rotation risk in Martinelli. But I think they are solid moves. Gabriel, though, obviously naturally not as appealing if you want to go for the more flair fullback options like James Justin, for example, at Leicester. And I see Tom's doing a great job of covering some of the questions in the chat, which is really, really good to see. So while I see Tom's covering a few of the questions in there, I think it's a great opportunity for us to now deep dive into our second potential differential going into game week 1. And that is going to be none other than Mr. Chilwell. So James currently rated owned by 44% of the game. Chilwell at the time of recording is around 11% ownership and exactly the same price. Now, you can see all the underlying stats here for Chilwell. Now, it's worth mentioning, this is taken from a much smaller sample size because, of course, he was injured for a large part of the season. So take this with a small pinch of salt. But stats per 90 minutes, 9.15 FPL points per 90 is absolutely absurd. 0.67 clean sheets per 90 and expected FPL clean sheets of 0.53. So really solid underlying stats for Chilwell. Naturally, the clean sheets being more team related. Obviously, the attacking output being much more Chilwell related. And you can see 23.6 predicted points for Chilwell, which is slightly below Reece James, but really not much in it at all. You can also see the Chelsea fixtures there as well. Starting off with Everton away, who of course lost 4-0 to Minnesota. We'll talk about that. Bloody hell. What a terrible result for Everton. If there's any Everton fans in the chat, please do let me know. Then a tricky fixture against Tottenham, Leeds, Leicester, Southampton. Now the big thing is with FPL assets like Chilwell and Reece James is when they are wing-back options and such phenomenal attacking options, we don't have to just look at the defensive fixtures, but also the attacking fixtures. And we see the likes of Everton, Leeds, Leicester, Southampton. While they all are kind of good for a goal sometimes, equally I don't see a stern defence. And with Chelsea's formation, we saw when they had Chilwell and James both in the side, their wing-backs were some of the most dominant players in their attacking third. And in particular Chilwell, from an eye test perspective, what we did see, and I think the kind of graphics do suggest this as well when we do look at the fantasy football fix site for heat maps and possession-based football, Reece James is a lot more competent possession-based footballer. You will see that when you're watching the eye test. Chilwell, on the other hand, is much more of a roaming fullback who likes to get on the end of crosses and obviously in the 6-yard box. And you'll see that with Alonso as well. And that's why Rudiger was such an important cog in that Chelsea team, because effectively Chilwell had the license to bomb forward and get on the end of any cross from Reece James and anyone on that side. And Rudiger was there to basically sweep up from Chilwell or Alonso playing on that side. So it's worth mentioning, whoever does replace Rudiger in that Chelsea team, it is going to be absolutely essential that they are able to basically 1v1 mark and also cover large spaces of the pitch, because Chilwell is a free man and he really does bomb on into that 6-yard box and 18-yard box. So from an FPL perspective, that's amazing. I fully anticipate him to be an attacking output again, and in particular with Chilwell versus James. Chilwell is much more of a goal threat. James is much more of a chance creator from an assist perspective. So it's worth noting that when you are considering both Chilwell and Reece James. But the reason I love Reece James and Chilwell as a bit of a dynamic in your template is Chilwell is 30% less owned than Reece James, but the underlying stats really don't suggest there should be a 30% difference between the two. Now, what I mean by that is, if Reece James was the same price, 30% more owned, but the stats were just completely in Reece James's favour, then I would say to you, don't take the risk. There's no evidence to go for Chilwell. Stick to the highly owned player. But I really do think at 11% ownership, the underlying stats are great for Chilwell. I view both James and Chilwell as almost equal counterparts as FPL options. And I think when you want to go against the template, you have to look for these little gems in the game where not only the underlying stats suggest that they're both on par, but they're both equally priced as well. And I think Chilwell ticks both of those boxes. So if you're not scared of ownership and you think to yourself, James could be a sacrificial lamb in this template team, I think Chilwell as a replacement is a brilliant alternative because the underlying stats completely back it as well. So you don't have to be sweating behind a sofa, because naturally, guys, you know I stress about it all the time. You cannot control the outcome. So as long as the decision making is good and you have stats to back it, then whatever happens in the outcome happens. And I really do think in this case that Chilwell is a perfect example of that. We got plenty of, not plenty of data because he was injured, but plenty of reasoning to believe that he could be as good of an asset as Reece James. And that's why I think as a differential, Chilwell is on par with Kane as a brilliant alternative to the template. So please do let me know in the chat, guys, what your thoughts are on the James Chilwell debate right now. I think he's a brilliant alternative to what we are seeing in the FPL community right now. I see Austin saying Ramsdale versus Mendy, torn between the two. I think that's a really good discussion as well there. Now, naturally, with Zinchenko, we need to see how he does adapt in that Arsenal team. But the way I'm viewing Chelsea and Arsenal right now is I don't get that excited by Arsenal's defensive options unless Zinchenko is a midfielder, whereas Chelsea's defenders are really, really exciting. So while Arsenal have cheaper options like Tomiyasu, yes, he's injured right now. I think Chilwell and James at 6 million are phenomenal options. I would rather probably go for the double up of Chilwell and James and have Ramsdale in goal rather than go for an Arsenal defender and Mendy in goal. So I hope that makes sense there. But I think Ramsdale's probably the safer pick. And I would argue as well that he probably has a higher potential for save points and bonus points because Arsenal naturally, from our underlying stats of last year, did concede a few more chances than Chelsea. And Donny's saying triple Man City, yes or no? I personally would be tempted by the triple up of Man City, but what direction you go is very dependent on the type of manager you are. I think the common combination will probably be Ederson as a 5.5 million goalkeeper that you just stick with, Cancelo as your defender, and Haaland up front. I think the riskier managers will probably go for Cancelo, a Grealish or a Mahrez in midfield, and then a Haaland up top. I think there's some real great combinations that we can play, and it's going to be all about the type of manager you are, and also the amount of money you want to invest in Man City assets. With Haaland being 60% owned and Cancelo being 40% owned, you either have to go for a 5.5 million goalkeeper in Ederson or a 6 million midfielder. So you basically save yourself 2.5 million if you go down the Ederson strategy. And I think a lot of managers are going to weigh that up and think to themselves, guaranteed game time at Ederson and plenty of clean sheets versus an incredibly high ceiling asset in Mahrez, but risky rotational minutes. I think they'll probably say, I'm going to save myself 2.5 million, go for guaranteed game time and a solid goalkeeper in Ederson, and invest that 2.5 elsewhere in a player that I know is going to get game time. So that's a really interesting one in particular. And Patrick's saying, hi, do you think I guess that's Leon Bailey will start at Villa? Yeah, of course, I just ended the conversation saying bloody Aston Villa. Apologies. I don't know enough about Aston Villa right now to understand whether he is going to be a starter. I think we still need to establish whether Aston Villa are going to be operating with both Ings and Watkins up front, or are they going to be going for a front three? I think if they go for the front three route, there's definitely an available spot for Leon Bailey to be on the left-hand side of the front three. So definitely have him on your watch list. Would I start the season with him? Probably not, unless we get concrete evidence from Steven Gerrard in a press conference that he says Bailey is one of our locked-on players. And if he is, at 5 million, that's going to be really hard to ignore. Now, again, guys, if you are enjoying the stream, please do drop it a like. We massively do appreciate it. We're at 37 likes right now. We always try and get to 50 likes. So if you can keep that trend going, we'd massively appreciate it. And if you haven't hit that, my voice went. If you are new around here, please do drop a subscribe as well. And Never Give Up FPL is saying, I have Sterling as an expensive punt. Now, it's going to be really interesting because I will, in a future live stream, show you some differentials in regards to actual template teams. And at 10 million with Sterling, I find it very difficult to find a formation and structure that you can go with that. Now, the benefits of going for a 10 million midfielder alongside someone like Salah is that you can then come down from that 10 million to any player. Whereas if you go for an 8 million midfielder, it is almost impossible for you to naturally, with free transfers, go up to Jarrod Bowen at 8.5 million or Fernandes and Sterling at 10 million. So almost if you start yourself at the higher bracket, it's so much easier for you to come down. But I'm really struggling to see how you're going to be able to build a team with Jesus and Haaland up front, the premium defenders, Salah, Sterling, and then probably your cheaper options. So I'm really interested to know what your team does look like on that one there. And Vivan saying, Darwin and Jesus up top and Salah and Son as the two premiums. Your thoughts, Nacho? Okay, so I know Darwin scored 4 goals, and I know that he could be a brilliant FPL option. But for me personally right now, I just don't think investing 9 million or 9.5 million into him is a good use of your money. I personally think going for Haaland or Kane is pretty essential as we speak. Now, the reason being is I repeat it and I repeat it. Going for those higher price players gives you so much more flexibility and such a lower level sort of risk factor because you can drop down to any of these players. So if Darwin does do amazing and Haaland and Kane are really going slow, you can just drop down to Darwin and have money in the bank. If you go for Darwin, he has a terrible start to the season. You're thinking to yourself, bloody hell, what have I done here? I now need to go up to Haaland and Kane and use my multiple transfers to get there. So I always prefer going for the premiums and dropping down the players, sorry. And Bobby's saying, why are people ignoring Mbeumo? Really good point. I think he just burnt so many of us last season. And it's a really good point though. Mbeumo could be a great differential to consider this season. And Youssef saying, I think that Robertson is the best differential. And Youssef, I do love that comment because that brings us on a beautiful segue to our final differential of the template team. And surprise, surprise, it is going to be Liverpool's Robertson at 7 million. And currently, I believe he's around 11% ownership right now. So we have plenty to discuss about Robertson because I think this is the one differential that we have here that isn't going to be a like for like in the template. Now, of course, if you can do Perisic to Robertson for the same and have the money in the bank, then I think that's a brilliant move. And I probably would recommend managers doing it. But there's a lot to think about with the Robertson choice. So first and foremost, let's just round up his season last year. You can see all the graphics on the screen there. 6.59 FPL points per 90. Absolutely ridiculous. 0.6 clean sheets. Expected clean sheets of 0.52. We know what we're getting with Liverpool and Man City. We're getting these brilliant defences who are just going to rack up clean sheets throughout the course of the season. But what we want to see from these players is the underlying stats from an attacking output. And what Robertson does bring is assist potential. Expected assist 0.19. We know he's not necessarily the biggest goal threat, but 0.07 expected goals per 90. I'm not necessarily disappointed with that to a T. Now, with the fixtures for Liverpool as well, I view Liverpool as one of those teams that are basically fixture proof, but it just makes it even better viewing when you see Crystal Palace, Bournemouth and Newcastle at home in the opening 5 fixtures. I think that's a brilliant run of fixtures, and not to mention the away fixture against Fulham as well for them. Now, of course, as I mentioned, looking at the template team, and just to remind you, the back 4 template right now in the team is Trent Alexander-Arnold, Cancelo, who is 7 million, James at 6 million, and Perisic at 5.5 million. Now, whereas I've said to you that I think Kane is a good replacement for Haaland, a like for like at the same price, and Chilwell is a great replacement for James, like for like, same price, I don't necessarily think Robertson is a replacement for Trent or Cancelo. Now, as I mentioned, I think Trent and Cancelo are up there as some of the best value players in the game. Not only the best value defenders, but the best value players in the game. So I don't think replacing Robertson for either one of those is a wise FPL move. What I do think could be a wise FPL move is replacing your allocated funds in the midfield for a premium defender again in Robertson. And this would mean shifting the template to 7.5 million and 7 million defenders. Then you probably are going to have to accommodate a 6 million in the likes of Reece James or Chilwell, and then have a 4 million defender in Nico Williams. You are boosting the value that you are putting in the defence. But when we look at this, guys, 7 million, and look at these underlying stats from last season, it's absolutely ridiculous. Now, I believe he hit 200 points again last season. Again, guys, let me know in the chat. Name me a 7 million midfielder or forward that's going to hit 200 points this season. It's just not going to happen. So we always try and be fancy every single season. We always come back to it. Robertson, Cancelo, Trent, all these guys in the top teams continue to be consistent performers. And it makes me question, is our investment in Luis Diaz the right move? Now, of course, a few things about the discussion here. Luis Diaz as a whole, 1 million more expensive than Robertson. So we have to take that into account, because if Luis Diaz matches Robertson this season, then we would argue then that Robertson is the better FPL option, because naturally he is per pound returning more FPL points. Now, there's a lot of caveats in this discussion. First and foremost, if we were to go for Robertson over Luis Diaz, it effectively means that the 8 million midfielder slot is probably going to be very difficult for you to accommodate in your team, which then naturally means your structure, you don't have the flexibility to go sideways to all the amazing FPL options available at 8 million. So you need to remember that if you do adopt the Liverpool strategy of both Trent and Robertson in defence. And the other caveat that worth mentioning as well is you can only own 3 Liverpool players. So I really doubt if you are going for Trent, Robertson and Salah that you're going to want to drop Salah down to Luis Diaz. So you have to remember that when you go for your Liverpool triple up, you always have to make your bed and sleep in it at the start of the season until you activate your wild card, because it's going to be very difficult if you do go for Trent, Robertson and Salah to then ship out Robertson to another defender and then upgrade a midfielder to Luis Diaz. So you need to remember that with the Liverpool triple up, whatever route you go down, I would recommend sticking for it with the opening 5 game weeks and hope that you have gone down the right strategy, because I think that's going to be a real important part of this season, whether managers go for the double defense or the double midfield. And hopefully we don't see major swings like we did last season where managers are getting absolutely punished. Now guys, let me know in the chat what your thoughts are on Robertson. Personally, right now, based on my team, I am opting for the Luis Diaz-Salah combination with Trent in defence. But that's only because I want to accommodate a flexible midfield that can allow me to go for an 8 million midfielder. But honestly, guys, as I mentioned, we always come back to it. Robertson is going to have guaranteed game time over the course of the season, playing in one of the best defences in the league and also one of the best fullbacks in the league from an attacking perspective, and $1 million cheaper. So I don't know why I'm always convincing myself to go for the different option in Luis Diaz, because at 11% ownership or 10.1, whatever he is at now, it seems criminal that he is a differential in the game, but lo and behold, he is. And at 24.9 predicted points, they're still solid predicted points for a defender over the opening 5 game weeks. So guys, let me know your thoughts in the chat. Are you on the Robertson train? Are you on the Luis Diaz train? Because I think that's going to be the big decision for managers to make come game week 1. And I think the closer we get to game week 1, the closer I'm going to be to going for the Liverpool double up in defence, as opposed to the 8 million option in Luis Diaz. So please do let me know in the chat, guys, what your thoughts are on the best Liverpool triple up. I see Bunny V saying all sheep chasing Haaland when he didn't even kick a ball. This is why FPL has become so boring and lame to play. Just sad and ridiculous. Bunny, I think that is obviously a real shame for you to think that right now. And importantly, you have to remember that you can play FPL however you want. Now, the template team is a template for a reason. These are all some of the best FPL options available in the game. So naturally, they are going to be the highest owned players in the game. And it doesn't mean that you can't go for a completely differential route. You need to play the game how you want to play the game. And if having a team full of differentials is the way that you enjoy the game, then that's absolutely the way that you should play it. Don't be playing a game that is different to you. I think the template is a brilliant introduction for managers going into the season, whether they're starters or even a safe manager, which I personally am. Because going for a template allows you to just be flexible with the structure and also flexible in your decision making going forward. If things go terribly, you know a lot of managers going terribly, and then you can start to make your differentials later on in the season. So it's a shame you think that on that one, but I don't think it makes the game boring necessarily. Colm saying, I'm trying to find a way to get Maddison in my squad. Yes, I think he could be a brilliant differential for Leicester. No European football whatsoever. So I really do think that is going to be a massive differential at the start of the year. And I think a lot of managers are naturally going to overlook him because they can't get him in because of the temptation of the likes of Saka, Mount and Kulusevski. We got one here saying, hey mate, please rate my team. Ramsdale, Trent, Robbo, James, Cancelo, Doherty, Diaz, Mahrez, Mount, Saka, Kane. Okay, so that's a stacked team there. So first and foremost, it's worth mentioning, Doherty I think is a bit of a risk right now. I think at 5 million, he could be a good investment, but it's almost a transfer waiting to happen because I do think that Jed Spence will nick game time from him. And I do like the double up in defence in the midfield, the triple up, sorry, of, hang on, you got a quadruple of 8 millions. Diaz, Mahrez, Mount and Saka. So I really do like it. The big problem here, you have got no easy route into the premium midfielders if they go big. Now, of course, you can play your wildcard early doors, but I don't like the way that your team's structured where you've almost accepted an incredibly early wildcard if Son or Kevin De Bruyne or Salah go massive in the early game weeks. I'd much rather you have a bit more of a flexible team where if you can postpone the wildcard, you can. I almost see that team as a wildcard waiting to happen in the early game weeks once the likes of Salah, Son and KDB go massive in the early games. So it is worth mentioning that. And again, guys, we're at 44 likes. Please do, if you can, drop a like if you haven't already. We massively appreciate it. Showing the support for the channel as always. I know you guys do deliver every single live stream. Colm say Chilwell looks a better option to me. With that, James sometimes playing as a right centre-back, it diminishes his attacking potential. Yes, it is worth mentioning that as well. Absolutely, Reece James from time to time could be deployed as a right centre-back. I do believe that if they do go for Koundé in the transfer window and do get him, then I would fully expect to see quite an established back three where James wouldn't necessarily need to come into that back three. Last season, the likes of Trevor Chalobah had to step in as a right-sided centre-back when the whole transfer saga was going on for Christensen. And I think Tuchel didn't necessarily fully trust Chalobah as a player at Chelsea. I think with Koulibaly, Koundé, Thiago Silva, he can allow Reece James to operate as a right wing back kind of seamlessly. But yes, it is a good point. Chilwell, from my experience, hasn't deployed as a left-sided centre-back, which naturally makes him a bit more of a consistent minutes in that left wing-back role. And Michael's saying, I was on Kane, but West Ham have just lost their star defender after being injured in pre-season. The back line does not look very good. Haaland could have a field day. So you're saying they've lost their star defender. I'm really interested to know who that was from being injured. But what I would say here is that Haaland is just so hard to ignore right now. I know Harry Kane, I've touched on him, and I do think he's an absolute proven FPL god. I just think with Haaland, with that ownership, it's just a safe bet right now, unfortunately. And then we can easily go sideways to Kane if we need to. Never give it FPL. Okay, so my team, you say, Meslier, Trent, Cancelo, Laporte, Janssen, Salah, Sterling, Mount, Neto, Jesus, Darwin, no Kane, no Haaland. Draft 37 out of 50. So yeah, I think first and foremost, it's worth mentioning that I believe Laporte hasn't been... Two of the Man City defenders have struggled in pre-season for fitness. Now, Salah and Sterling as a combo is really interesting because Sterling allows you to drop down to any midfielder possible, basically, below that, which I really do like the option there. Personally, though, I just don't like the option of Darwin because I'd like to have the opportunity to go to the premium forward. So, absolutely rate the draft. I think it's a real nice differential draft. I just personally wouldn't do it because I want to have an opportunity to go into Kane or Haaland early doors in the season. Matthew's saying I have Robbo and an 8 million mid, but it means I can only get a 7 million forward like Tony instead of Jesus. Is that worth it? And I have Robertson and an 8 million mid, but it means I can only get a 7 million forward like Tony instead of Jesus. Is that worth it? So look, I absolutely think there are going to be forwards that emerge. Unfortunately, at 7.5 million, I think that's where the real gems are, like Callum Wilson, for example. At 7 million forward, I haven't seen many that really catch my eye right now. So it's going to be all about the strategy that you want to adopt. Now, obviously, this is what I touched on. It's very difficult to have all your cake and eat it here. Naturally, if you do go for the Robertson defence and an 8 million midfielder, you're sacrificing that Jesus pick in the front line. And that's why naturally everyone's coming back to this template that we did touch on because it kind of just occupies everything that you want, really. So I like the move, but I cannot recommend any 7 million forward that I am massively bullish on. You could then go down to someone like Solanke or Mitrovic and accept that while you're not bringing in a player that has the best fixtures going forward, you are bringing in a talisman in a promoted team. That could be a consideration. Now, Ollie M has put a really, really good point in here. Martial with a question mark. And that is the big thing here, question mark. We've seen in a recent interview with Ten Hag that he has done. Well, our understanding from reports is that they don't want to sell Martial and they see him part of their plans. My big question to you is, if Ronaldo stays at Man United, I am one of those that doesn't believe he will start the season if he does stay at Man United because the guy has not kicked a football in pre-season. And Ten Hag, I believe, is a lot more strong-willed than the managers we've seen before in the likes of Solskjaer and bloody... oh my God, who was the caretaker? I can't remember the caretaker. However, I don't see Ten Hag just completely going, Ronaldo, you're in first game week. So I actually think Martial has got a real shot of being the one to start the season off as their centre forward. But the big question is, when Ronaldo's sat on that bench, you know it's only a matter of time until he nicks game time away from Martial. So I like it early doors, but I just anticipate there could be an early wildcard available at the start of the season for you to get out of that trouble. So guys, I think we are going to do a few more minutes of this. I know we're around the hour mark and I wanted to wrap this up around the hour mark. So we're going to cover off the last few questions and then we're going to wrap it up there. As again, guys, just to kind of conclude this live stream from a kind of template team perspective, The ones that I really like in terms of sideways move from the template is this. Kane instead of Haaland, but as I mentioned, personally, I prefer the ownership in Haaland and being safer. The other alternative is going for Chilwell over Reece James, and this is the one that I'm a lot more bullish behind, just because the underlying stats are great for Chilwell. I don't think there are reasons to think that James deserves to be 30% higher than Chilwell. So if you want to go template but have a slight alternative to the template, I think Chilwell is the perfect solution to that. And Robertson is the third differential to the template, but this alternative means that you completely restructure your template and you either go for Trent, Cancelo, Robertson, James or Chilwell, but then you sacrifice an 8 million midfielder to accommodate Jesus and Haaland, or you go for the backline that I mentioned, the midfield that we discussed on the template of Salah and 8 million, but you sacrifice Gabriel Jesus up front to maybe a Mitrovic or a Solanke. So it is worth noting that. But honestly, guys, Robertson, Mr. Consistent around the 200 point bracket, cannot be sniffed at. He's a brilliant FPL option. Right, Ahmed saying, is Lingard a better option than Bruno Guimaraes? No, I think Bruno is a better option right now. Do I think Lingard could emerge as a brilliant option? Absolutely. I need to see it first. We know that Bruno is getting guaranteed game time and is a real important influence on that Newcastle attack. Liam Burns, Saka plus Kane or Son plus Jesus? Oof, I probably would go for Son plus Jesus personally. Jesus' ownership is monstrous right now, and I think Son, we've seen it in years gone by, absolute reliable FPL asset, an additional point for a clean sheet, and an additional point for a goal, so it is worth mentioning that. Patrick, Meslier, Trent, Cancelo, James, Diaz, Saka, Bruno, Bailey, Haaland, Kane, Jesus. Okay, so you've got massive in the front line. Now, while I have said that I like managers going for the top end price because you can come down, I personally think that the combination of Haaland, Kane and Jesus is a little bit too much because now you have no premium midfielder. So if the likes of Son, if the likes of Salah, if KDB go massive, you're going to require 2 additional transfers to get yourself down from a premium forward and then up from a midfielder. So while I like the strategy, and it definitely is a differential one that could come big, I think that's probably a little bit too big in the premium front line, personally. Okay, it's interesting. Agerd is the one that got injured, which is a real shame to see there. Aston saying, hey bro, can you rate my team? Cucurella, Zinchenko, James. Okay, so first and foremost, I wouldn't bring Cucurella into your team because he's going to be a major rotation risk, and I think his minutes would be super limited. And Zinchenko, I think, is worthwhile having as a placeholder. But right now, until we know exactly where he's going to operate in this Arsenal team, I wouldn't consider him as an option right now. James and Trent, I absolutely rate. Mount, Salah, Bailey, Kane, Jesus, Haaland. Again, I think that's too much in the front line, but I really like it as a differential team if you're really looking to go against the template. Body by Duff is saying, good evening all, great to be back with FPL. Yes, hope you're doing well, buddy. I've gone with Mendy, Forster, Dallo, Trent, James, Zinchenko, Neco Williams, Salah, Diaz, Rashford, Andreas, and Visser. Kane, Martial, Havertz is my first. Okay, so I think you've got a solid team there. Again, we haven't touched on Rashford much. I think he's a great 6.5 million enabler in midfields. Kane / Martial / Havertz. So I'm guessing that is your front three. Havertz, again, someone we haven't touched on. If he does operate as the number 9 in Chelsea, I think that could be a big season for him as well. I like it. I would just question whether you haven't got some of the big owner players, in particular Haaland and Jesus. I'd probably rather you go Havertz to Jesus personally. Tom saying, Jimenez is nailed on penalties as great fixtures. Yes, but we did see a shadow of the man last season, unfortunately. And that's enough of a reason for me not to consider him. Saga saying, what was my rank last year? I finished 270th in the world last year. So by far my best ever season. My history, 270th last season. I finished 8,900 in the world the year before. And I finished about 70,000 the year before that. I can't remember the year before that. I think I finished about 80,000th. But yeah, I've had 4 solid seasons. And 2 of the seasons in particular have been by far my best and beyond. So guys, I think we are going to wrap up the live stream there. We've just creeped over the hour. And I massively appreciate you guys tuning in to our second live stream of the season. I really hope you've been enjoying the new setup of the live stream. I really do like the clean look that we've gone for this year. We can really go deep diving into some particular hot topics. So as always, with these live streams, we are searching for hot topics. So if you do have any, please do make sure you drop us any sort of hot topics on our social medias. You can see them all in the bio below. Let us know on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, even in the comment section on videos. It'd be great to see because we're always going to be dropping these Friday live streams. And importantly, guys, the content is fully back. We are going to be dropping daily videos throughout preseason, and of course, once the season gets going, we're not going to be stopping. There is going to be daily videos week in, week out. So make sure you do hit that subscribe button, like the video. Can we get it to 60 likes? I would massively appreciate it. And importantly, that notification bell just alerts you every time a new video drops, and it will let you know when the live stream is dropping, but usually around 5:30 UK time. So thanks again, guys, for tuning in. Massively appreciate it. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video and, of course, the next live stream next Friday. Take care. Cheers.